walk with Jesus, so you got a story that they'll want to know. Because there'll be a day they want to know. They will.
We are so blessed that you've tuned in to The Implanted Word today. The Implanted Word is the radio ministry of Pastor Bill Gim and Grace Church of Amarillo, Texas. Grace Church seeks to make disciples verse by verse, and The Implanted Word is an extension of that mission. Today, we come to the 18th chapter of Exodus with a message titled In-Laws, Outlaws, and the People's Court. So if you have your Bible available, open it up and join us for today's Implanted Word.
I've told you many times how I met Cindy at Bible college. I was all of 17. She was all of, I can't tell you because she's 1 year older than me, but do the math. And so, anyways, I found her at Bible college like the second day I was there. And then I literally started chasing her around. And then thankfully she let me catch her. But it didn't take me but about 9 months into meeting Cindy that I found out that Cindy had a father. It's one thing to know Lucinda Joy Johnson. It's another thing to know Pastor Merritt Johnson. Old school. I mean, really old school. Like the guy never took off his suit kind of thing. And, there I am coming right out of Colorado, and he is straight-laced, Bible church, here we go. But he's got the most beautiful daughter. So I try to figure out how to, kind of get in the favor of Dad Johnson. And so that began its own journey all by itself because, he's just a different kind of guy. And but it was through Dad Johnson. And I worked for him before Cindy and I got married. I actually worked for him as an intern for the summer. And then the next summer, I got married to Cindy, his daughter. I had to ask him. I still remember when I had to knock on his office door at the church on a Friday morning. Nobody else was at the church in the middle of Michigan, out in the trees, in the boonies. I was so scared because Dad John was so intimidating. But it was working with him, and he finally said yes. But then he told Cindy, "You're not moving to Colorado." Well, I married her, and we moved to Colorado. And that was 41 years ago. You know what? Let me give you some wisdom. Dad Johnsons never go away. I got his daughter, said goodbye, 64 Ford pickup, black Labrador. We're going to Denver. But Dad Johnson didn't go away. Matter of fact, he'd come visit his daughter. Like regularly. With his wife, Cindy's mom. And then her brothers and sister. And then we would go to Michigan. And I actually learned so much about being a pastor of a church by watching Dad Johnson, my father-in-law, who at first, to me was nothing but a tie, nothing but a sermon, nothing. But then over time, and me to him, I was nothing but a jerk. Hey, you're that hippie guy out of Colorado that's wearing those mountain boots. I mean, the big, Frankenstein mountain boots, that was me. Skinny like this, but I had big old boots and a motorcycle. Listen. Father-in-laws never go away. Daughter-in-laws, son-in-laws, moms and dads, brothers and sisters, they never go away. And whatever's happening in your life for the moment, praise God if God's moving in your life for the moment. But you have to know, family's watching you for decades. And they're not going to buy it right away when you show up with I had a bougie hat, little, like hippie hat. They ain't going to buy it. They're not going to say, "You're the greatest thing to ever come up here and date our daughter." They're not going to say it when you jump off a Greyhound bus at 4 o'clock in the morning in Battle Creek, Michigan. Because the first time I met Dad Johnson, that was the deal. My bus got in at 4 o'clock. Boy, was I excited. Him and Cindy was excited, but no, anyway, I'm kind of getting off. You get the drift. Dad Johnsons aren't going away. And neither are you. And there's this other whole thing that happens in life as the years turn into decades. And then the decade turns into a lifelong testimony of what Jesus is doing with me. And what Jesus is doing with Dad Johnson. Welcome to Exodus chapter 18. Verse 1, Jethro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law. I read the chapter today. Nobody else I read pointed this out, but I actually went through and counted. A father-in-law is mentioned 13 times in this chapter. Dad Johnson just showed up with Moses, okay? And the priest, Jethro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, well, he heard of all that God had done for Moses and for Israel, his people, that the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. By the way, father-in-laws always hear. They might live in Michigan, but they know what's going on in Amarillo, Texas, because that's where their daughter is. They hear. What I'm trying to get across is, hey, over time, your father-in-law, or maybe I'm a father-in-law today, and Simon, he's been my son-in-law for 10, 11 years now. Simon, I know what's going on because he's got my daughter. And there's value in relationships over decades with father-in-laws above us. But also value in relationships as a father-in-law for the ones under us. And you can put in brother-in-law, you can put brother or sister, whatever but family relationships. Jethro hears what God's doing with Moses. Now, if you remember the story, the first time Moses showed up, he was 40 years old and helping Zipporah out at the well. She goes home and says, Dad, how'd you get back so early? Well, this guy, where's the guy? Hey, you want Zipper for a wife? Means little bird. So the way the whole story started with Jethro, he gave Moses his daughter. Moses is 40. Remember that Moses worked for Jethro for 40 years. They weren't even his own sheep. They were his dad's sheep. But he was a faithful shepherd for 40 years. And then the bush started burning. Can you imagine Moses trying to tell Jethro that story? Well, you see, I was watching your sheep. And Jethro going, yeah, right. Oh, by the way, I left out a very big detail. The reason Moses was there because he's a murderer out of Egypt. By the way, most of the time you don't want a murderer dating your daughter. You know what I mean? Take her. But all of that background. But now, years later, 40 years later, and now at least months later, since he went to Egypt, all the plagues Jethro has heard. Jethro's heard what God had done for Moses and for Israel's people. That the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. By the way, I hope my family, above me and below me and all around me, continue to hear what God's doing with and through me. In other words, I hope there's a story worth hearing. Are you tracking with me? Because as long as God's doing something, well, then they're going to be hearing something. But if I've just all of a sudden become a bump on the log and stop, I want them to still hear. What's God doing? What is he still doing? Not what he did 20 years ago. What's he doing now in Amarillo, Texas? Then Jethro. He hears about Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took Zipper, that actually means little bird, Moses' wife, after he had sent her back. And Moses sent her back with the boys when things got really rocking in Egypt, with her two sons, of whom the name of one was Gershom. Dun, 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 dun. I'm sorry, I got to do this. Dun, 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 dun. You got Gershom? You say, why? Well, because there it is, a second time in the Bible, G-E-H-M. See it? Gershom, G-E-H-M. Every time I see, anyways, okay, it's personal. Find your name in the Bible. Go ahead. I'll give you permission. Okay, the name of the one was Gershom, for he said, I have been a stranger in a foreign land. And the name of the other was Eliezer, for he said, the God of my father was my help, delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. So anyways, here comes Jethro. He's got Zipporah, his wife. He's got the two grandkids, Moses, his son. He's coming, and let me see. Where did I leave off? And Jethro, verse 5, Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, came with his sons and his wife to Moses in the wilderness where he was encamped at the mountain of God. So he's coming right up there to Sinai. He's coming right there where all the law is going to start happening. We get to that next week if the Lord should tarry, and I get through this chapter. But here he comes. By the way, Dad Johnsons never go away. They hear, and then they come. They come. And then they bring you stuff. I remember the time Dad Johnson showed up with Cindy's brother, Jeff. He's 20 years old and said, whoa, yeah, I'm bringing him to you. I was all of 26 years old. That's another whole story by itself. But anyways, Jethro's coming with Zippor and his 2 sons. Verse 6. Now, he had said to Moses, your father-in-law Jethro am coming to you with your wife and your 2 sons with her. So that was like he gave him some notice, okay? He's actually letting him know ahead of time. Don't want you to be surprised, but here I come. If you are a father-in-law, that's good advice. Let them know you're coming, okay? And I've showed up a couple times surprising people, and it's not always a surprise the way you thought. You can read between the lines. But verse 7, okay? So Jethro's letting him know. So Moses went out to meet his father-in-law. You know what that is? That's his wisdom. If you know your relatives are coming, go meet them. Greet them. Welcome them. Remember, your lifelong testimony is before your family. Moses went out to meet his father-in-law. He bowed down, that's their custom, and kissed him. They asked each other about their well-being, and they went into the tent. They're going to have a deep conversation. So it's not like they're just being polite. Moses was genuinely thrilled. Dad came to find me, brought my wife back, brought my kids back. Boy, do I have some stuff to tell him. Because Jethro had heard, God's doing some stuff through you. You're not just a crazy guy seeing bushes. It really is the hand of God. All of that's coming back. Because, see, when you first get saved, all your friends just think you're nuts. They think you're delusional. They don't believe it. When I first got saved, my dad thought it was a phase. It is. It's 46 years. It's still a phase. It's not going to go away until I go to heaven. But see, when you first get saved, they brought you up. They trained you. They've watched you. They don't buy that right away. Burning bush. Yeah, right. But then after you get out there with your staff, and there's blood and boils and frogs and everything else, and then the Red Sea splits. That kind of story gets around. Just, I think I'll go find him. I want to hear this for myself. One of the best times in life is when you get to tell your family that they weren't at the dirt story. They weren't when you got the building. They weren't there when radio happened. They weren't there when all of us, when they weren't there. And then you get to tell the story because they want to know. They want to know, hey, I heard some people got baptized. I heard 3,000 people were around the church at Trucker. And then they want to know. That is the best. It's sweet. By the way, you want to have those kind of stories to some degree, right? How God is using you. You don't want them asking stories about me because I already know what they're saying about me. Your pastor's crazy. He's crazy. I was at the hospital today. I walked out, I had 3 nurses, 2 guys and a lady, and the one guy said, Are you that preacher at Grace Church? I said, no, that ain't me. This is on the 4th floor of the hospital, ICU. And he looked at me, he said, you are that guy, aren't you? I said, no, I'm just a janitor. He said, well, you're a janitor at Grace Church, right? I said, how do you know me? And then he named a lady that was in our church, and they actually took care of a sister, Rachel, from 12 years ago. They remember from 12 years ago. And their question is she still alive? I said, yeah, she's still alive. She still comes to church. So I took pictures of 3 nurses. I'm going to get it to Rachel and say, hey, Rachel, you need to go up there and let them know you didn't die. She should have died, but she didn't die. She's another miracle. She goes back to being one of those miracles that happened in our church at the last building. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that people really do want to know, maybe not on the day it happens, but then, 12 years later? 40 years later? I'm still proving to Dad Johnson, I love your daughter. And I do. What's the point? Love your family. Walk with Jesus so you got a story that they'll want to know. Because there'll be a day they want to know. They will. So they go into the tent. Verse 8, Moses told his father-in-law. I'd love to hear this conversation. Moses told his father-in-law all that the Lord had done to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, all the hardship that had come upon them on the way, and how the Lord had delivered them. Can you see Moses in the tent telling Jethro, oh, you should have been there, Dad. It was so amazing because, the Nile turned to blood. You should have seen their eyes. They were big as saucers. Their God is bleeding. I think it sounded something like that. And Jethro said, tell me more. Oh, man, when the frogs showed up, man, it was so cool. They was in their Wheaties, in their closet, their undies. It was everywhere. Really? Can you see? Can you see that? Can you feel it? Those are the best conversations. When you get to tell the stories, because they want to know, what has God done? And then, and the hardship. Oh, Dad, you can't believe it when they took the straw away. They told us to keep making bricks, and we got no straw. And then everybody doubted, but you know what? God was so faithful. And then the Passover, oh man, we put the blood of the lamb on the doorpost and the death angel, everybody's crying. They told us, get out. We went door to door and they just gave us all our stuff. What a great, guys, that's as good as it gets in this life. When you're with your family. So you can still remember from 40 years ago and 30 years ago, and I would show up, and 32 years ago when we started our church, and he's a police officer and he's got all his own stuff, but I'd come in with these crazy stories. And then crazy stuff happened in his life and my life, and then all of a sudden he wants to be a part of the story. You tracking with me? You see, you want this kind of thing happening in your life because it's only a matter of time before family's going to want to know. And then that same family might want to jump in and help. Because, by the way, Jethro needs Moses. But Moses needs Jethro. It works two ways. Simon needs a father-in-law. But this father-in-law needs Simon. It works both ways. And they're in the tent, they're telling the stories and all that God had done to deliver them. Verse 9, then Jethro rejoiced. Jethro rejoiced for all the good which the Lord had done for Israel, whom he had delivered out of the hand of the Egyptians. And Jethro said, blessed be the Lord who delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians and out of the hand of Pharaoh, and who has delivered his people, the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all the gods, for in the very thing in which they behaved proudly, he was above them. Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took a burnt offering and other sacrifices to offer to God. And Aaron, that's the brother, came with all the elders of Israel to eat bread with Moses' father-in-law before God. So they have this big old meal and celebration. He's given a sacrifice to the Lord, and your God's above all the gods, and woohoo! And all of that's because of a 40-year witness that Jethro could trust and see, and finally, your God is God. Your God is God. And he praised him, worshiped him, sacrificed to him, and they had the big old meal. But the story doesn't end. Verse 13. So it was on the next day that Moses sat to judge the people. And the people stood before Moses from morning until evening. The people stood before Moses from morning until evening. Can you imagine what it's like if you had to stand in line from morning until evening, waiting and waiting and waiting to discuss with Moses, your prophet, your shepherd, your leader, your problem, your dispute? Moses sat to judge the people. The people stood before Moses from morning until evening. So when Moses' father-in-law saw all that he did for the people, and Moses is doing all this for the people, he said, what is this thing that you are doing for the people? why do you alone sit? And all the people stand before you from morning until evening. And that's a really good question. Like, hey, Moses, I'm just making some observations. I'm just, why are you alone doing this? Remember with me, there's 2 to 3 million people. And so they're coming when they need God's answer. They all didn't have a Bible. Remember, Moses writes the first 5 books of the Bible, okay? And so they're waiting to get information of what they need to do. Why is it that you sit alone and all the people stand before you from morning till evening? Verse 15. Then Moses said to his father-in-law, well, it's because the people come to me to inquire of God. And that's good. That's really good. The people come to me to inquire of God. When they have a difficulty, they come to me. And I judge between one and the other. And I make known the statutes of God and his law. By the way, that's really good. They come to me. I let them know what God's thinking, what God's law says, the statutes. And, we're coming up to the 10 Commandments. We're coming up all that. And Moses has already got some information. I mean, he's starting to share. So he is actually, if I said pastoring, judging, informing the people. And that's what he's supposed to do. Except they're standing in line from like here to the boulevard. One by one, one by one, one by one. Verse 17. So Moses, his father-in-law, said to him, the thing that you do is not good. The thing that you do is not good. Both you, hey Moses, you and these people who are with you will surely wear yourselves out. You and these people with you will surely burn out. You can't sustain it. This has no longevity. Hey, I was coming down here just to give you a pat on the back and say, way to go, God, way to go, Moses. But now that I'm seeing what I'm seeing, hey, Moses, son-in-law, listen to me. Hey, now why do you do this? Well, I teach him the statutes of God. I give him God's direction. Well, that's good, but the way you're doing it's not very good because you know what? You're going to burn out. You're not going to make it, Moses. You're not going to make it. For this thing is too much for you. There's too many people. The line is way too long. This thing is too much for you. You are not able to perform it by yourself. Sometimes you need an outsider to see what's going on. And when Jethro sees this line forever, and you've been standing there from sun up to sundown, well, he was actually sitting. The people were standing from sun up to sundown. And then the line never really got short, and then they all had to go back. They're all going to be back. And Moses, what are you doing? No, I got to do this. I got to do. And Moses, amen. He's doing the right, but he's doing it the wrong way. Are you tracking with me? It is his job to be the one giving out the word. It is his job to give this judgment. But somehow, we got to redo the math on this. We have to redo the math.
Pastor Bill will continue this message on the Thursday edition of The Implanted Word. The Implanted Word is a listener-supported ministry, and we rely on your prayer and contributions to continue airing this message on your station. To donate, please visit theimplantedword.com or download our free app from the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store and select Donate. You can also mail your contributions to The Implanted Word Donations, 4111 Plains Boulevard, Amarillo, Texas 79106. Today is Wednesday, and Pastor Bill and the staff of Grace Church would like to invite anyone in the Amarillo area to our Wednesday evening service. Grace Church is located at 4111 Plains Boulevard on the corner of Plains and Western in Amarillo. You can also tune in to our live webcast. The service starts at 7 p.m. Central Time. For more information or the live link, visit graceamarillo.com. Until next time, may you be filled with the truths of the implanted Word. The Implanted Word is listener-supported and sponsored by Grace Church of Amarillo, Texas.